And we are back. Welcome. As I've discussed in some previous videos, one of the purposes of this channel is that I have been frustrated for a while with how hard it is to find people that are making a genuine effort to be balanced when they consider political, religious, and philosophical issues. And so I thought, hey, I'll try and create that here to the best of my ability. In my first video, I talked about Jordan Peterson and how there was a while where I thought that he could be a major part of the solution to the rifts in our society, because in the earlier days of his fame, he was quite good about kind of looking at things from perspectives common on the left and perspectives common on the right, speaking to the value and need for both voices on the left and voices on the right. That's what made me think he might be the kind of person that can help bridge divides. But unfortunately, over the last few years, he seems to have really dug in on the right side. And as someone who's right of center myself, that doesn't bother me. But it does bother me that he's losing his balance, because I personally don't think we need another right-wing pundit. I think we need more people that are balanced and trying to be not in the middle for the sake of being in the middle, but being explicitly aware of the valid perspectives on both sides. So I'm going to be getting into doing some more of that. Relatedly, I have mentioned recently about how this weekend I did a podcast recording with a friend of mine from my church. He works, he's pro-life, and he works with a pregnancy crisis center, and I'm pro-choice. And so we sat down and discussed abortion and the ethics thereof, and it was a great conversation. Good, like, it was light-hearted, humorous at times, and there was zero hostility. And yeah, so he's going to be putting that together in the next few weeks to post online, and I will post it here. But for today's video, I'm going to be talking about free will, personal responsibility, and the word privilege, the concept of privilege, which is popular on the social justice left. So there is a great deal of reason to doubt that we have free will, or that if we do, to doubt to what degree we are really actually truly exhibiting free will. You'll see what I mean in a few minutes. So the standard view is that we are the combination of our genetics, our socialization, and the interaction between. Now, people will often say, is it nature or is it nature? That's not a good question, because it's both of them always. You could have a man and a woman who are each 6'5" or taller, but if they malnourish their child, that child is not going to be tall like they are. Likewise, you could have a set of parents who are each 5'7" or shorter, not a single one of them having a relative of 5'10" or greater, and they could feed their kid perfectly, set them up in inversion therapy 20 minutes a day every day ever since they were 2. That child is almost definitely not going to be 6 feet tall. Similarly, alcoholism and proneness to addiction have been found to be highly heritable. We'll get into heritability more later. But there were no alcoholics before there was alcohol. If a Major League Baseball player were to have a child with a player on the women's national baseball team, but they don't allow their child to play sports, their child is not going to be the athletic star that either of its parents were. There is something that nature and nurture, however, have in common. We don't control either of them. We don't pick our DNA, and we also don't pick where, when, and to whom we are born, those sorts of circumstances, what we are exposed to at a young age. By the time we start exercising any real choice on what sorts of things we participate in and engage in, our decision making has already been substantially shaped by things out of our control, namely our DNA and our earlier upbringing experiences, which were largely, if not completely, out of our control. So it sure sounds like free will is very much in question here. But there actually is a philosophical school of thought that allows for everything I just said and still acknowledges a sort of free will. The compatibilist position, that's what it's called, is the position that we are the sum product of our nature and our nurture and the interactions in between. And so if that is what we are, so long as we are acting in accordance with what we are acting freely. As B.F. Skinner has said, free will is the ability to do what you want. So we'd be doing what we want based on who we are. However, Skinner went on to say, and he's probably like the father of behaviorist psychology, or certainly one of the early big figures. He said we can't choose what we want. So it's like, even in this compatibilist position, this is a pretty weak form of free will, because it itself is determined. It's like we're determined to be ourselves. Moving into the cognitive the cognitive sciences, there have been studies which further call into question the reality of free will. There have been studies, for example, showing that the neural correlates underlying a particular behavior or decision can be observed prior to the person's awareness of making the decision or engaging in the behavior. Now, this research, however, has not been without question. There's the question of a person could be aware of a decision they're making before they're able to say that they're aware of it. So that's possible. So there are, but it's not a piece of evidence, a collection of evidence, a large collection of evidence. It's not easily dismissed. Then there are split brain patients. So these are patients who the left and the right hemispheres of the brain have been separated from each other, namely by severing the corpus callosum, which is the bridge that connects the two. Now, this is sometimes done for people with epilepsy whose seizures are uncontrollable, and so they try to mitigate the damage caused by seizures by cutting the brain's left and right halves apart from each other. So if we can't stop the seizures, at least we can confine them to one half of the brain and not the whole thing, so to speak. A primary researcher in this area is Michael Gazzaniga, if you want to look it up. And he's done research showing that basically it looks like the left side of our brain, the right side of our brain, let me start, it does not interpret the world, it just looks at the world very concretely. No inference is made, nothing like that. It's the left half of the brain where the interpretation, the narration happens. And so what he's found in a variety of types of studies is that when you sever the left and the right half of the brain, a person can do something, and then when you ask them why they did it, they give you a reason that is obviously wrong, but the person is completely confident in it. So one example that I remember to a fuzzy degree of detail was they would slam a door behind somebody, and the person would look back, and then the experimenter would ask, why'd you look back? What's up? And they would say something along the lines of, I was just checking to make sure my jacket's still there. So it's like they're giving an explanation, but it's clearly the wrong one. And so what this suggests, but they really believe it, right? And so here it's like we have a hallucination of knowledge of why a person is doing what they're doing, which you put that together with the thing I just discussed about the neural correlates of a behavior preceding it. It starts looking like, the flaws in these studies notwithstanding, maybe the individual is observing their behavior almost like you'd be observing the behavior of another person and then trying to draw inferences on what was going on based on the behavior. Now, obviously, we have more information looking into ourselves than out to another person, but this is more reason to believe that maybe the action comes first and the decision does not come from us. But we just merely try to understand it after. But since the time lag is so small, we can hallucinate that the idea came before the behavior as opposed to the behavior coming first and then us trying to explain it with an idea. There was another set of researchers, Richard Nisbet and Timothy DeCamp Wilson, who published a huge study in 1977, which I'll link in the description here. And it was called something like Telling More Than We Can Know. And what it did was it showed example after example of situations where a person would do something for a reason that the experimenters like had a very good reason to believe they knew the reason, and then they would ask the person why they did it, and they would rarely say the right answer. So like how they could do that is, for example, they could run like a pilot study where they engage in some kind of, they manipulate the environment in some way that will produce a predictable behavioral response in the people in the room. And so what they'll do is they'll do that, and then they'll find, okay, hey, when we do this thing, people do this thing 60% more often than if we don't do that thing. So like if we do X, they will do Y 60% more often than if we didn't do X. So then what they'll do is they'll have another group of people come in and they'll do that thing. And then a lot of those people will do the expected thing based on what the previous pilot study showed. And after that, the experimenters will ask the people, why'd you do that? And it's like more often than not, much more often than not, they do not cite the thing that the experimenters have already proven to produce this sort of behavioral effect predictably. They would have other explanations. It's like if there's a situation where a person was watching a movie in the context of other people, and one of the people next to them eats 5 cookies in like a communal bowl of cookies or whatever, and then in another iteration of the study, that person, instead of having 5, only has 1. They might find that in the situation where the person has 5 cookies, the other people in the room will have more cookies than they would have had if they had and then the versions of the study where the person only had 1 cookie. So it seems like they are being influenced by that person. But when you ask these people, why did you have as many cookies as you did? They almost never cite as even one contributing reason what that other person did. They'll cite everything else. They'll be like, oh, I was hungry because I missed lunch. I didn't eat much because I'm going out for lunch right after this, or I'm about to go to the gym, so I don't want to fill up my stomach. Now, it's possible that the reason they did not say the actual factor of the person next to me had a bunch, so I did too, is because they didn't want to admit that they were so influenceable. So that's totally possible. But so here we're having all these studies that have counter arguments to them, but they are pointing in a similar direction. And there's much more than I'm touching on here that goes further into this. People like Daniel Wegner at Harvard, and as I mentioned, Michael Gazzaniga, and so forth. Like there's no shortage of research on this. So at the very least, it seems from the cognitive science, free will is it's questionable at best. So let's get into, I mentioned I was going to get back into heritability. Let's go back to that. Basically, everything that is relevant to a person's ability to achieve, to be happy, to be well regarded by others, everything that feeds into that is highly heritable, which means that genetics play a significant role in them. As I mentioned above, it's not the whole thing. Just because you have tall parents doesn't mean you're going to be tall, especially if they don't feed you. But genetics plays a role. And they find this by doing things like twins raised apart studies. So here's some things that are highly heritable: height, obesity, ratio of fast versus slow twitch muscle fibers, intelligence and cognitive efficiency, every subdomain of the big 5 personality traits, proneness to addiction, proneness to aggression, possibly every mental health diagnosis there is. And then going back to the personality traits, one of those was conscientiousness. And that's big here because conscientiousness, or like a person's ability to kind of like pick a goal and stick to it and follow it through. Let's say that you are you want to be a sprinter, but the thing is that you don't have as many fast twitch muscle fibers as a typical successful sprinter has. And so you want to work hard to see if you can partially compensate for that. Well, even your ability to motivate yourself to work hard is highly heritable. So even that, it's like the very ability to rectify your own setbacks is itself something that isn't, is not in your full control. And then oftentimes, usually, these sorts of heritability factors will be emphasized and blown up further by socialization factors. So, for example, if you have two highly athletic parents, in addition to them passing on their genes to you, they're probably going to be doing a lot of athletic things with you. More athletic, they'll do that more often than people with more bookish parents. And so you'll have a compounding of the heritability factor. And now I'm sure it's sounding like I'm sounding pretty fatalistic here when I say basically every aspect of what's relevant to your success is highly heritable. And even your ability to correct it through conscientious dedication, that is highly heritable. And so it kind of sounds like, what's the point in even trying? And I guess the answer to that would be is that you don't really know where your set points are, where your fuzzy boundaries of your limitations are. Like maybe you have not been very conscientious so far in life, but maybe like you might be a little bit of inspiration away from finding that conscientiousness. You just might not have found what's interesting to you. And so I wouldn't say it invites fatalism. Like that's not a good way to look at this. Don't use these considerations as excuses not to try. However, let's say that there are two sets of parents who have kids, and one of the kids' parents are both athletes and one of them are not. Like it might make sense for the child with no athletes in their family. Maybe it wouldn't be crazy to think they might not get as far in sports as the other child. Not guaranteed, but a little bit of realism, could come in handy. But still, you never know your potential until you push yourself as hard as you are able. So now that I've called free will heavily into question, let's talk about what is called privilege, primarily on the left. Privilege it's been a buzzword now for, probably about a decade. And what it is typically defined as being is an unearned state of advantage of some relative to others. So unearned advantage relative to others. So a good example of this is if someone, just has an attractive face, very symmetrical, nothing too big, nothing too small. You don't really earn that, right? But it does affect how people treat you and how people want to associate with you. Likewise, if you're born to a very wealthy, well-connected, and intact family, you're going to have a lot of advantages and a lot fewer disadvantages than someone who is born to a single parent in poverty with little to no connections. These are unearned advantages that can play a big role in your life. However, that is not to say that all advantage is necessarily a case of privilege. Like we should ask that, is all advantage a case of privilege? Like I grew up with a single mom, and she immigrated to Canada as a refugee from East Africa 10 years before my birth. My dad wasn't around. We didn't have much in the way of family connections, and we definitely didn't have a lot of money. And so like that set me at a series of disadvantages relative to I had two parents, and they were affluent, and they'd both been in the city for their whole lives, and so they knew people and they knew how the culture worked really well, all that kind of stuff. But despite those disadvantages, I managed through years and years of hard work to raise myself to a very comfortable position, financially speaking. And that affords me with a lot of opportunities and takes away a lot of stresses. Like if my air conditioner breaks tomorrow, it's not going to cause me financial stress if I have to have it repaired, and if I have to have it replaced, even it's not I'm not going to like it, but it's not going to be the end of the world by any stretch of the imagination. Is this privilege? Did I not earn these things? Are these are advantages? Yes, but are they not earned advantages due to years of unremitting conscientiousness and drive? Well, yes and no. I mean, yes, I did do the work, but I didn't earn my natural drive and my conscientiousness. I can't help it. This is just what I do. It's I've been on the keto diet for over 3 years and I rarely cheat. And the reason I rarely cheat is because for whatever satisfaction I would get from eating that cookie, I would be frustrated at myself 3 times more for 3 times longer. So I would punish myself. And so it's like a lot of people say, oh, you're so disciplined. And like, yeah, in a way I am, but in another way, it's like I'm emotionally dysregulated because I can't allow myself to loosen up. Like likewise, I was similarly driven in school. Like this is not something that I just, I could turn off if I wanted to. I couldn't just choose to be a chill person. That was not in the cards for me, I don't think. So those natural dispositions, and plus, like like I'm a pretty smart guy and stuff. Like I wasn't the smartest kid in class, but I was always like above average. Again, something I didn't earn. Like I cultivated it, but I cultivated it based on what was already there that I didn't earn, and the conscientiousness that I had ever since childhood that, again, I didn't earn. It was just there. And so the question is, do I deserve the good things that come from this? And then on the other hand, I am highly neurotic. I can be temperamental at times. And I'm 5'7", which is rather difficult for a guy. My life would certainly be better if I was more chill and 6 feet tall. So why should I suffer lesser advantages than others who have been born more fortunate in these regards? Is that fair? No. But the thing is that, unsurprisingly, the world is not fair. If you take the causal sequence back far enough, for every strength and every weakness you have, you eventually find out that at some point it starts from something that was undeserved. Yet, if you're intelligent, conscientious, well coordinated, have a symmetrical face, are prone to a mesomorphic or muscular body type, are extroverted, people will offer you more favorable treatment and opportunities because they like you and they respect and value what you can do more than what others can do. And why? Well, for one, they can't help admire what they admire or find attractive what they find attractive. And further, they themselves are trying to optimize for their own situation. So, like, for example, if you're looking for someone to provide a service for you, and there's 2 people that can provide them at similar prices, but you know that one of them is significantly better at it than the other, like, regardless of the reason for why that person is better than the other, you're probably going to choose that person. And so it's just a natural thing. But this creates a series of philosophical, moral, and logistical problems, because it certainly seems like, basically, to a large degree, or maybe even in a way, if you take it back enough, to a total degree, the things that are either going to make us successful and happy and so forth and well regarded, and the things that are not going to be, or that are going to have a negative effect on that, they are not in our control. And so is it fair to punish us for our shortcomings and reward us for the things that we're more blessed with respect to? So that's going to be the subject of the next video. In the next video, I'm going to be going into policy regarding this, and I'm going to be taking perspectives from the left and from the right. I'm going to try and be genuinely fair and genuinely balanced and give both sides their due. So I hope you'll join me for that, and I will see you then.